Hey guys, just had to jump in here real quick before we get started. I have to apologize for my appalling sound quality during the interview. The audiobook portion of it, obviously, is 100% where it needs to be, but my microphone was not working that day and we had to get the interview done, so we just did it. Jayna's, the author's quality on her mic was absolutely fantastic, so no worries there. But yeah, just wanted to let any new listeners who are coming to the podcast know that this is how I normally sound. During the interview, there were some mic problems and issues there that were not able to be resolved in time, so hopefully you can forgive me for this faux pas on the audio recording side of things. Definitely worth it to listen to the interview for all of Jayna's replies, and like I said, her mic was just fine, so thanks guys for your understanding and patience with my audio quality problems, and hopefully it will not happen ever again. All right, welcome everybody to Another World Audiobooks. I'm so happy to be here with a very special guest. This hasn't happened in a long time. There was a while there where I did several indie author interviews, which is a lot of fun, and I've really been wanting to get back into that. So today I am very privileged to have the authoress of several books. One is called Preacher on the Run, and the other is Patriot at the River. And these are books that I have had the privilege of actually narrating myself. So they're going to be live and available where good audiobooks are sold. So, and we'll be playing a sneak peek little sample chapter of one of them here in a little bit. But before we get into that, I want to have a little conversation here with the authoress herself. So please welcome to the show, Jayna Baas. Jayna, thanks so much for being on today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's my privilege to be here.
Yeah, and so you have written a book, more than one book, and you're working on other books, which I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how much time and effort goes into writing a book. So how long have these books been in the process?
Oh my, that's a really difficult question to answer. And it's a little complicated because I had ideas for the second book first, started working on that one, really got stuck. And in the back of my mind, I knew someday I'm going to write this prequel and it will happen 9 or 10 years before this book, and I'll worry about that later. Well, when I got stuck, it was actually my mom who suggested, what would happen if you backed up and wrote the first book first? And that seemed so obvious, but I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I backed up and started on the first one. So it was probably about 4 years for the first book, Preacher on the Run. Some of that time just involved all the times I sent it to people to have them read it, give me feedback before I finally took the publishing plunge. So that wasn't all writing time. And then Patriot at the River, the second one, that's the one that I have a really hard time knowing how long it took, because it was probably about 7 years from when I had the idea to when I actually finished it, but I took a pretty long break in there to write the first one.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that is incredible. Yeah, and I think as a reader or listening to audiobooks and stuff, it's very easy to just absorb a book really quickly and just move on. And especially audiobook wise, like you can do that, in 7 or 9 hours or whatever it is, and not realize the years and years of blood, sweat, and toil that went into the creation of this work. So I love hearing from authors who've actually been in the trenches and done all the hard work. It's really cool to kind of give you a sense of what went into the book. Now, and the other thing that the listeners need to realize is these aren't just books, like they are created out of your imagination, which that in and of itself is awesome. But there's a ton of historical research that went into these too. So was that a big part of what's kind of used up your time as you're writing? Because you're not just writing, you're also doing a lot of research on top of these, correct?
Yes, that's definitely a big part of it. And even the parts that aren't research still take time when it comes to working the history into the story. Some of the most challenging parts are when I'm writing an actual battle scene or working a real historical event into the story, because my tendency is always, I did all this research. Now I'm going to play the historian and tell you who all the historical figures were and where they were on the scene. And then I realize most of that doesn't have anything to do with the story. So I really have to take a step back and figure out, what would my character actually know? What's he experiencing? What are we experiencing with the character? And so that probably is a big part of what takes the most time from the historical standpoint, and just lots of reading.
Yeah. Makes sense. Did you come across like a specific source that you like leaned on heavily, or were you just finding stuff all over the place?
I would say all over the place. I use my library a lot. I order books from other libraries through my library a lot. And quite often I would find primary sources listed in the bibliographies of other books I was reading. So I did have access to one book in particular, for Preacher on the Run, was all the original documents from the era I was writing about that had to do with that particular conflict, which was the Regulator Uprising in North Carolina. So that was really helpful because I could see kind of in people's own words why they were fighting what they thought was important. And that really helped inform the way I was writing. But it was also very interesting and challenging sometimes because you would see firsthand accounts from the British perspective, since North Carolina was still under British colonial rule at the time Preacher on the Run happens. And then you would see other primary sources from the opposing side. And sometimes it's like they're reporting the same facts, but the spin is just so different in each direction. And then it's my job to sort through, okay, where's the truth in the middle of this? And It's a fun challenge, but definitely a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, man, that is incredible. The books that I've written have been just straight out of my brain. So like the research side of things was very minimal, maybe a little bit of location to make sure I got a city street name or something like that. But man, that depth of research and stuff is extremely impressive. And I think for the listeners, I should probably mention that these books are based around, the first one is pre-Revolutionary War, and the second one is kind of right in the middle of it. Which I love that time period. I think it's just a fascinating time period. And one of the things I think you do very well in the books is bring out the fact that it felt cut and dried. I think as Americans, a large part of my audience is Americans, but I have a large part of the audience that's across the pond and all over the world, actually. So it wasn't as cut and dried. I think there were definitely people on both sides that were just doing what they thought was right in the moment. And you do a great job of kind of bringing out the different perspectives and also getting to the source of truth there. Like you said, the actual contemporary documents, the firsthand accounts and that sort of thing, just really shine a very interesting historical light on it that I don't think you get in a lot of historical fiction these days.
Part of my goal was to kind of shed light on some of the less familiar parts of the war. I think everyone kind of knows about the Boston Tea Party and Paul Revere's Ride and some of the other major events, especially in the New England area or New York or Pennsylvania. So that's a lot of why I chose North Carolina and dips into South Carolina and Tennessee just a little bit, because those settings are a lot less familiar. And I think that's also where you see how complicated the war could really get when it wasn't just the invading army that you were fighting, but your own neighbors quite often. That was a big part of the struggle for independence in the South particularly, and that's just something that I thought there aren't a lot of books that really explore that, so it was a fun opportunity. I guess fun might not be the right word. I mean, I'm writing about war, and I have to figure out how all that works together, but definitely an interesting challenge.
Yeah, no, well, war is one of those things that is endlessly fascinating, I think, especially in a time of peace. Like, in the USA, we're very blessed to live in a time where we're not worrying about wars on the home front here. And so it's almost a foreign concept to the majority of the population. And that's a huge, thank God that that's the case. But it is interesting that fascinates us in that regard. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Cool. So we're the two books are narrated. They'll be, if they're not out already, once this publishes, they will be out very soon. So we'll be putting links in there, and I'll be sharing that stuff. So I definitely highly recommend that you guys go and check it out. These books are very, very good and extremely well narrated.
I would agree.
No, it was a lot of fun. We getting those narrated, and there's a lot of one of my favorite things about narrating is being able to do different voices and accents and stuff, and this one has a very wide range. So speaking of that, there's a lot of characters in these books, which I think that always makes for good stories when it's very character driven. Did you, like, when you were coming up with like specifically the main characters, was there it sounds like there was some historical inspiration for those that kind of came in there?
I would say so, especially for Preacher on the Run. I had been reading and watching a lot of history based on the struggle of some of the early Christians in America, in colonies specifically where the Church of England was the only church that was really allowed. And so there were a lot of Christians who didn't conform to the Church of England, and that left them quite often in a very persecuted position. And so there were several historical preachers that I kind of drew from for inspiration for my main character. None of them was an exact match, but that was kind of what inspired the general idea of what if we had a preacher who's just trying to lead his flock, defend his family, and he ends up in this situation where he has a price on his head. That's kind of where that seed of an idea came from.
Nice. Yeah, and so was so you started writing the second book first, and then you went back and wrote the first one. Was that the first novel that you had written?
Yes and no. It was the first full-length novel I had written. I've been writing pretty much ever since I learned how to write. So I had stories going way back, and I would say I probably had 15 to 20 shorter book-length works. So maybe 120 pages rather than 300. Most of those will never see the light of day. There are a few I've thought about maybe pulling out and doing some serious editing on, but these were my first full-length ones.
Nice. That is awesome. Yeah, and I think that one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard when people were talking about wanting to be an author, wanting to get into writing and all that sort of thing, and just getting into anything, I think it's life advice that applies all over the place, is that if you want to write, you write. It's not something you can just hope happens, or that someday you'll have a book laying at your feet. It's gotta happen, and you just have to do it. So yeah, I think it's very good advice for all aspects of life. And as an author, as myself a little bit here, I'm curious, like, what is your kind of program for writing? Like some people, they get up, first thing in the morning and they just jam out some text, or other people are late night writers. Other people kind of squeeze it in here and there. Have you found kind of a system that's helped you actually get consistent output?
My process is more sporadic than I would like it to be, and more sporadic than it probably should be. But I've found what's most effective is usually if I do my writing, not necessarily first thing in the morning, but definitely first thing before I move on to my other work for the day. My other job is freelance editing. So I find if I move on to other clients' projects, then all of a sudden I have a different author's style in my head, and it gets really hard to switch back to mine. Which can be kind of a problem depending on what I'm editing. So I try to do my own writing first, and I try to follow the same routine every time. Some people don't care that much about little details, but I find if I listen to the same playlist and I sit in the same spot, all that kind of thing, it does help me be more consistent. And just working on pushing through that first 10, 15 minutes where it's like, it would be so much easier to go do anything else other than this. But once you hit the 20, 25 minute mark, then you kind of get into the flow. And some days all I get is a couple of pages. Some days all I get is a couple of paragraphs. It just depends on the day, but consistency is the key.
Yes, exactly. Just got to keep hammering away. I love the phrase that everybody, or most people, want to have written. They don't want to write.
That is so true.
Definitely know that feeling. Do you have a go-to playlist?
I do. It's all instrumental. I could maybe listen to stuff with words, but that just messes with me a little bit. Michael W. Smith, the Christian artist, actually had a couple of instrumental albums that are just very cinematic and heroic, and that's usually what I go to. I also have a kind of Celtic-inspired instrumental playlist. My books are not set anywhere near Ireland or Scotland, but I have a lot of Scots-Irish characters, and there's a lot of kind of Appalachian feel in there too. So
yeah, nice. Yeah, those good picks there. Yeah, I think having there's something about the cinematic. It just kind of puts you in that movie feel and kind of lets the words flow a little more freely. Sometimes it seems like. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much again, Jayna, for coming on. Is there a specific place you want to send listeners if they're interested, if they want to check things out? What's the best spot for them to go?
That would be my website, which is booksbyjayna.com. That's booksbyjayna.com. And readers can sign up for my newsletter there to get free short stories and updates on all the things I'm doing. And there are also audiobook resources on my website for maps and extra historical info and all the things that don't translate well to audio but are still fun to peek behind the scenes and see.
Awesome. Yeah, so people go check it out. Again, that's booksbyjayna.com, and I will put the link in the show notes of this podcast, so it'll just be right there. You can click right over. And like she said, sign up for that newsletter. There's some free short stories and stuff that are really cool. Add a little more flavor around the books as well. And then I'm sure on the website there will be links to the audiobooks themselves. But next, we're just going to jump right into a little sneak peek sample chapter of one of Jayna's books, and I think you guys are going to love it. And after you listen to it, make sure you go and check out booksbyjayna.com, get the full audiobook. One of the things about doing this podcast is being able to bring free audiobooks into the world. But then we have indie authors like Jayna, who she's doing this. This is a passion project. This is something she's put her heart and soul into. And I think anytime we can support people who are doing stuff like that, John Grisham does not need your money, but Jayna Baas needs your support. So go check it out. Again, that's booksbyjayna.com, and the link will be in the show notes. So now, without further ado, let's jump into this sample chapter of Preacher on the Run.
For Liberty and Conscience, Book 1. Preacher on the Run. A novel of early America by Jayna Baas. Narrated by Brady Smith. Copyright 2026 by Jayna Baas. Published by Sunrising Media. Part 1. Resistance. March through May, 1771. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Romans 12:18. 1. 4 years later. March 1771. A. Ford, North Carolina. Robert Booth had never known his favorite county justice to burst in on a late-night regulator meeting at the A. Ford Baptist Meeting House. Other folks certainly had done just that. The sheriff, for one, but not Geoffrey Sheridan. The moment his old friend came through the door, Robert knew this was a warning. "Sheriff Kendall on his way?" he asked, stepping away from the men clustered in the back of the meeting house. "Not only the sheriff." Geoffrey Sheridan was in his middle 40s, only 10 years older than Robert, but tonight he looked 60. "One of the governor's men is with him, a new man, Colonel Charles Drake. I don't know what you and your men are meeting about tonight, and I've no wish to know, but Drake is looking for trouble. If he looks here—" "I allows he'll find it." Robert smiled grimly. "Thanks, Jeff. Now, you'd best be getting out while you can." A musket butt cracked against the door. Too late for anyone to run. Robert motioned Sheridan behind him an instant before the door crashed against the wall. Robert had dealt with the wrong side of the law before. He'd preached without a license for 15 years, and led regulators for nearly half that. And the last thing A. Ford needed was a new agent of Governor Tryon. The stranger behind the sheriff wore a sword that branded him as a military man. No older than Robert, tall and trim, coal-black hair and a flawless queue, and eyes that looked right through a man and out the other side. "What's this about?" Robert said. "There's a law against seditious meetings." Eboniah Kendall was a big man. Robert was solidly built, but the sheriff was easily 60 pounds heavier, made weightier by the knowledge of his own power and the musket he held at Robert's chest. "I've seen my share of dissenter preachers calling for rebellion. Don't try to tell me this is just neighborly talk. It's the kind of thing the governor wants put an end to, which is what Colonel Drake and I are here to do." "This being Colonel Drake, I gather." Robert nodded toward the stranger, who was examining the room. Simple plank benches, a few windows, a front door Kendall had forced open, and a second exit behind the unadorned pulpit. Drake pulled his attention from his perusal and wordlessly inclined his head. From the corner of his eye, Robert saw Saul McBraden move restlessly. Lord help. If Saul took a notion to knock the sheriff upside the head, 5.5 feet of musket would blow the pastor of the A. Ford Baptist from here to kingdom come. Robert wanted to go to heaven, but not that way. "Put the gun down, Sheriff," he said evenly. "I'll give you fair warning that you're on God's property, and he's watching you. But beyond that, I'm not aiming to run, and I'm not aiming to fight you." Saul McBraden exploded. "But preacher, they have no right to come on in through here unprovoked and—" "I told you, there's a law," Kendall snapped. "Not by our rights as Englishmen," Saul muttered. Robert eased in front of Saul before Drake could see the young man's clenched fists. Saul's hair was more blonde than red, but every now and then the red showed in his temper. If Saul got angry and the officials got angry, the lot of them would end up in jail, which they would anyway if Sheriff Kendall and this Colonel Drake fellow found out they'd been meeting to discuss unjust taxes. "If you're here to break this up, then break it up," Robert said. "There's no need for it to get out of hand." Jeffrey Sheridan came forward a step. "These are good men, Colonel." "I'll be the judge of that." Drake's gaze rode over the small gathering of men, church members and otherwise, before again coming to rest on Robert. Drake said nothing more, but there was a challenge in his silence, a challenge Robert felt to the soles of his boots. Charles Drake was not finished with Robert Booth. "Everyone get out!" The sheriff gestured with his musket. The men looked at Robert. He nodded. One by one, the men filed out the front door. The governor's riot act made a felony of failure to leave the meeting within an hour of the sheriff's order. Sometimes a man had to pick his battles. Saul was last to go, looking as if he'd just as soon stay and fight it out with the law. Robert held his ground beside Jeffrey Sheridan and watched Colonel Drake watch the men. The governor's new man was all chiseled edges and poise, dark and polished, how Robert had always imagined an Eastern military man to look. Robert was more a continuation of the rough brown wood of the meeting house, oak brown hair, bronze skin, buckskin hunting shirt. Not of Drake's world at all. "I would never have guessed," the colonel said, "that a building as small and plain as this could ever be suspected as the breeding ground of mass rebellion, or that a man like you should ever be suspected as the leader of it." "Life is full of surprises, Colonel." "Are you admitting—" "Nothing at all." A spark of something like humor flickered in Drake's dark eyes. "I see." He held Robert's gaze a moment longer, then wheeled abruptly and motioned for Kendall to follow. Kendall moved toward the door. "If anything comes of this, we'll be back, and we'll be coming for you." "It'd not be the first time," Robert said quietly. "And you, Sheridan?" Drake paused at the door. "This is the last time you'll play with fire." When Robert got home, Susanna's piping 7-year-old voice instantly came from the sleeping loft overhead. "Is Papa home? Can I get up and say goodnight, Mama? You said I could if I was awake. I'm awake!" "So I hear," Magdalene Booth murmured as Robert leaned down to kiss her. "Let her wait a minute," Robert whispered into Magdalene's hair. Thick, dark bronze ringlets, loosely bound back, smelling of lye soap and thyme. Robert's manservant Gunning came in and hastily edged back out. Gunning could wait too. Magdalene gave Robert the minute he'd asked for, plus a little more, then pulled away and called back to Susanna. "Come say goodnight, then back to bed." Susanna patted down the ladder, her light blonde curls wisping out from under her nightcap. Her cornflower blue eyes suspiciously heavy. She stopped a few feet short of Robert and asked, "Why are you holding Cricket?" He'd been loading his rifle once as Susanna watched him close the hinged frizzen that struck sparks over the priming pan. "It squeaks," she had said, "just like a cricket." The rifle had been called Cricket ever since. Persistent squeak notwithstanding, it was a beautiful gun. Tempered .45 caliber bore, flame maple stock, brass fittings, scrolled carvings Robert had done himself on long winter nights. The flint was knapped sharp, the trigger as smooth as any he had ever known. He'd take Cricket and a good horse over any other advantage a man could name. But there were times, like tonight, when a good rifle was not the answer. "You know Papa brings his rifle down to the meeting house sometimes," Magdalene said smoothly. "Can I go with you next time, Papa?" "Depends how late it is, and what I'm doing." Robert reached around her and set Cricket in the corner. "What were you doing this time?" "Talking with some men." "About the vestry tax?" Robert frowned. "Who told you about that?" "Benjamin told me." Susanna said. That explained it. Benjamin Woodbridge, older brother of Susanna's best friend, was 12 and knew everything.
And I heard you say it to Mama after meeting last Sunday,
Susanna added. Robert glanced at Magdalene, wondering what else Susanna had overheard in days past. The vestry tax is a mighty heavy subject for so late at night, Susanna, and a mighty heavy subject for a curly little head like yours.
But what is it?
Money we have to chunk in to support the Church of England, even if we don't agree with the Church of England. Susanna's forehead puckered.
But that's not right.
Well, some of us don't think so.
Rob.
The soft southern in Magdalene's voice turned his name into a syllable and a half, a quiet warning that it was late, and this was no time to rehearse their grievances. So he amended his statement in silence, thinking, a whole slew of us don't think it's right. Baptist, Presbyterian, Quaker, who knows what else. We all hate it. All but the Anglican clergy it profits. Gunning came all the way into the room this time. Sorry, Master Rob. I didn't mean to walk in on you and the missus while you were, No harm done, Gunning. Robert winked at Magdalene.
While you were what, Papa?
Susanna piped up. Nothing, Pumpkin. And neither is the vestry tax. Nothing to bother your head about, that is. How did a man explain a decade and a half of injustice to a 7-year-old who didn't know what extortion meant?
Papa?
Susanna said.
What's extortion?
Benjamin again? He asked. She nodded. I figured, he said.
I don't hear anything that sounds like good night,
Magdalene said.
Good night, Papa.
Susanna lifted her face for a kiss. Robert complied and gave her a gentle nudge in the direction of the ladder. He had never meant to drag his family into his stand for freedom, but these days the struggle touched every part of life. He wished he did not feel so powerless to stop it. How was the meeting? Gunning asked when Susanna had disappeared into the loft. You just heard. Nothing to bother your head about. Gunning gave him a look. That might work on Miss Susanna, but not on me, no sir. It doesn't work on her either, Robert said wryly. John Woodbridge needs to grub up more work for Benjamin. The scouts say Governor Tryon got leave from his council 4 days ago to muster his militia and march our way. We've a meeting of regulators planned, but in the meantime we're studying on what to do. We didn't get far before Sheridan came to warn us. He passed lightly over the details of his encounter with Drake, not wanting to frighten his wife. Not that Magdalene Davies Booth was an easy woman to frighten. She had left her life as the privileged daughter of a plantation owner to follow Robert to his mountain circuit, where she had known things far more frightening than officials with inflated views of themselves.
Is there anything you can do?
Magdalene asked when he finished. Get a license, Robert said with a humorless smile. That's all a man like Drake wants. Control over what I say and where I say it. He thinks he's got more say over it than the Lord does? Gunning's smile was equally mirthless. If he thinks he does, he's wrong, Robert said. The county has no authority to limit where and when a man may preach the word, but even Geoffrey Sheridan doesn't seem to understand that, obliging as he's been. I didn't tell him I'm fixing to preach in the open air tomorrow. He'd not have taken to that notion, though he'd know better than to think he could change my mind.
Give him time, love, Magdalene said gently. The Lord didn't show you everything in a day.
Geoffrey's had 9 years, Robert said dryly. But you're right, of course. You always are.
I try to be.
Abruptly, the teasing left her voice.
This Colonel Drake, did he know who you are? How you've organized the regulators here and led petitions and all?
If he did, he didn't say so, Robert said, which is what worries me. 2.
Rob, wake up!
Magdalene was shaking him. Robert opened one eye, grunted,
Wake up! Did you hear that?
He rolled halfway over. Hear what?
That!
The straw tick crackled as Robert sat up and listened. Someone across the street seemed to be making an unholy din. He glanced at the kitchen window beyond the doorway. Dawn was still well over the other side of the horizon. Some no account out celebrating. But what there is to celebrate these days, I don't know. He lay down again and waited for Magdalene to settle beside him. More likely, maybe, someone making a protest in his own way. A crash, like a door rending from its hinges. Across the street, but loud enough to be their own front door.
I don't think that's it, Rob,
Magdalene said in a small voice.
Across the street, that's...
Jeff Sheridan's house, I know. Robert was already on his feet, reaching for the garments that lay over the chair in the corner. Something's wrong. Stay here, and I'll go see.
Be careful, Rob.
He threw on his clothes. Don't you worry, love. Torchlight flared from Jeffrey Sheridan's house as Robert stepped into the street. A pair of horses moved restlessly in front of a splintered void where the door had been. Robert's fingers tightened on Cricket's cool barrel. If whoever was over there crossed the street to kick in Robert's door that way, Cricket would do the talking. Robert was a peace-loving man, a preacher, after all. But when it came to protecting family, preachers in these parts could shoot. He edged cautiously past the horses. Voices carried from within the building. Sheriff Kendall's, strident as always. Sheridan's voice, and a deeper, quieter one. The words were indistinct, but the tones indicated an argument. Footsteps neared the doorway. Robert faded into the shadows. Sheriff Kendall appeared with a torch in one hand. Behind him came Colonel Charles Drake, escorting Jeffrey Sheridan. Sheridan's lips were pressed together, his hands clasped in front of him. Not clasped, shackled. Anger surged through Robert, a knot shy of white rage. Without moving from the shadows, he said, "What do you think you're doing, Drake?" Colonel Drake wheeled. The torchlight accentuated the sharp lines of his face, turned them hard as stone. "Reverend Booth, I might have known." "I asked you a question, Colonel." "What do I think I'm doing? Was that it? I might ask you the same." Robert moved forward. "I'm looking out for law and justice is what I'm doing." "Don't try, Rob," Sheridan said in a low, weary voice. Drake's smile showed straight, perfect teeth. "On the contrary, law and justice say Sheridan has countermanded the governor's authority long enough." "That's a rank lie." "No doubt you would say so. From what I understand, you've reaped most of the benefits." "That is wrong, Colonel. My word here is law, not to God." "Listen to me, preacher." The smile was gone. "The only reason I'm not taking you with him is that I'm giving you just enough rope to hang yourself." Magdalene looked out the window, seeing dim silhouettes in the torchlight. 2 men, no, 3, parting from one lone figure. Dark shapes, nothing more. What if Rob...
"No, Lord, I'm not going to go there."
She forced herself to turn from the window. The taper she'd set on the kitchen table flickered as Gunning let himself in the back door. "You all right, Miss Maggie?" She almost couldn't see him, the way his dark skin blended with the shadows, but his deep voice was comforting.
"I'm well enough. Rob went to see what the noise was."
"I figured he would. That's why I come in. He'd have wanted me to."
"I just hope Rob doesn't do anything foolish."
The front door opened behind her. Robert said, "I haven't, though I've surely a mind to." Magdalene turned. Robert shut the door. His voice and face were calm. Too calm. But when he looked at her, the candlelight showed that his eyes, the deep color of warm molasses, were not.
"What happened?"
she said, as much for Robert's benefit as her own.
"I thought I saw the sheriff."
Aye. He set Cricket in the corner with care, but a little more force than was strictly necessary. And Charles Drake.
"But what were they doing at Sheridan's house, in the wee hours of the night?"
"Arresting him, for treason."
"Oh, Rob, no."
"I thought you said he let Sheridan off with just a warning at that meeting of yours," Gunning said. "When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for 7 abominations are in his heart," Robert said bitterly. "What did you do?" Gunning wanted to know. "I'd have shot him if my conscience would have let me." He rubbed the back of his neck and looked at Magdalene. We had some peace with Jeff on the court. He kept the rest in line. But now, it's up to me.
And all the other men like you,
Magdalene said softly. She saw the quick twist of his lips, a melancholy half-smile. He knew good men stood with him. He knew the Lord stood with him. But in some part of Rob's mind, it would always be up to him. She was scared to death of what could happen to him, standing against men like Drake and the governor. But she was proud of him, too. She let her eyes follow the rugged line of his profile, his wide shoulders, his nut-brown hair cut just to the back of his collar. Next to the Lord, she never loved anyone as she loved Robert Booth. He was an easy man to love, as a rule, but she knew for a fact she wouldn't want to stand in his way when once he'd had enough.
What about preaching out of doors tomorrow?
She asked. 'Twill be a risk for sure, but I've got to, Maggie. Robert pulled her close, resting his chin on her hair. If I'm next to go, I haven't much time left.
All right. Once again, thank you to Jayna Baas for allowing us to share this chapter on the podcast. As you can tell, there's a lot of historical work that went into this book, and it's definitely something that I recommend you go check out at, again, booksbyjayna.com. Again, that link will be down in the show notes for you to check out and get the full book, and also you can get 2 books, so it's really cool as well. So definitely go. I love supporting indie authors, and this is a great one to do that with. Hope you guys enjoyed this bonus episode and the interview and everything. I'd love to hear your feedback. Please get in touch. Again, that's anotherworldaudiobooks.com. And if you do purchase the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So, as always, I love making this more of a conversation than just a one-way street here, which is why the interview was a lot of fun. And if you enjoyed that, if you want to hear more of these type of author interviews with book samples and stuff as bonus episodes, we can definitely make that happen. But I want to hear from you to know that that's something that you actually find worthwhile. So please get in touch. Thanks again to Jayna for sharing this with us and allowing us to put it on the podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you on the next episode.